Just a quick note, this is a continuation of the MultiSub object breakdown, so if you haven't watched that, go ahead and watch that first. Link in the description. So today we're creating this. More specifically, two different displacements on an object, each one corresponding to the textures on that object. So in this case, one displacement is for the texture on the outside, and then one displacement is for the texture on the broken inside of the stone. Here I've exaggerated the textures so you can see the difference between them, and you can see that they are different, and you can also see that the strength of them can be controlled separately. So first I'm going to select the mesh. I'm going to select all of the modifiers on the stack, right-click, collapse all, and confirm it. So even though we did that, we still have access to each individual piece if we go into element mode, so it retains that property. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a V-Ray displacement modifier on top of this whole thing. It works the same way pretty much as plugging in the displacement map into the material, but it has some nicer options, and we'll go over some of that stuff. On a side note, I just want to say that when you import a material from Quixel Bridge, the displacement map is not actually linked to the material. It's there, it's just not linked to anything. And that's because if you're using V-Ray, V-Ray has its own modifier that we just applied to the object. So it basically gives you the choice of which displacement you want to use. So for this, we're going to go ahead and use the V-Ray displacement modifier. So basically I could take the displacement map and drop it into the V-Ray displacement modifier texture map. And you'll see here that the default settings are way too strong and there's a lot of other things going on here. So basically our effect is too strong, so I'm going to drop it down from 8 to 3. There's this parameter called shift, and basically what that does is that you can see that the faces are separated. So what shift does is it kind of moves them back into place, because the displacement itself is actually moving them. So shift will just shift the positions back into place. And a good starting place is to take the amount number, divide it in half, and then put a negative in front of it. So if it's 3, it would be negative 1.5. If it's 4, it would be negative 2. And that should shift them back into place, but you can still see that there's a gap between faces. So if you go ahead and check keep continuity, it'll go ahead and close those gaps, fill that in, so you don't have any small holes in the geometry. So as a small rule, you want to kind of shift the pieces back into place and get them as close as possible, and then use keep continuity. So we don't have a separate displacement map for the first outer material, so I'm just going to duplicate the original material, apply a color correction, and just lower the saturation so it's black and white. It's not exactly the best way to do it, but it'll work for what we're doing here. So I'll go ahead and drag the end of this node after the color correction into the V-Ray displacement map modifier as an instance. Now there's a couple things going on here that we need to talk about. First of all, the effect is too strong, but if you look at the material on the outside, you'll notice that the displacement actually does match the texture, but this same displacement is actually being applied to the material on the inside, and you can see that it doesn't match the texture there at all. So this is why we need two different displacement maps connected properly so that we can get the proper displacement for the texture. So this is where we use a multi-sub texture. It's basically the same idea as a multi-sub object, but for textures. It uses the same idea of using the material IDs in order to map the displacements properly. So the default number of slots is set to 20, and that's way too high, so we'll change it to 2. And then what we'll do is we can apply this to the V-Ray displacement texture map as an instance. And you'll see that all of the displacement has gone away because we don't have anything hooked up to the slots yet. So I'll hook the first displacement material into the first slot, and then you can see that pop on in the viewport. But you'll notice that nothing happened to the second material, the inner broken faces. So we'll go ahead and plug the second material's displacement into the second slot, and you can see that that popped on in the viewport, and it's only affecting the inner faces which are tagged with material ID 2. Now there are some problems. The outer texture is way too strong, so we need a way to adjust the strength of the outer texture without affecting the strength of the inner texture. And if we just use the V-Ray displacement modifier and change the amount, it's going to be a global adjustment, meaning it's going to affect both of the displacements. And we only want to affect the outside. So the beauty of the multi-sub texture is that we can control the strengths independently of one another. So we'll just go to slot 1, and I'm going to knock it down to 20%. And you'll see that the outer texture is the only one that's affected, and it's more in line with what we want. Now this looks awesome from a distance. You could really see the texture in the surface, and so it catches the light and everything, so it really looks awesome. Now one of the things I'm noticing is that we have this little bit on the back edge, part of the picture, which isn't actually concrete. It's actually the fence above the concrete, and then you can see into the background some bushes. So I'm just going to go ahead and crop that, and that's going to take that out. And so now we don't have that edge on the back sticking up. So that's basically it for the multi-sub objects and multi-sub textures. Now that we know this, we can actually move on to making something really cool, which will be the collapsed parking garage ceiling. So stay tuned for that, that's coming next. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Keep an eye out for the parking garage ceiling collapse breakdown, which is coming soon. Thanks guys.